Made it.
All right, we are getting started today. Welcome, everybody. We have folks trickling in, so we'll give it just a few minutes so everyone can get set with their audio, and we will start the presentation shortly. Logan, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Of course.
Excited for our conversation today. Uh, Logan, Steph, and I were just riffing on the nature of these like career defining moments and uh, the fact that this disaster is now in the past. Obviously, one of these things that can totally reshape a team and a community, and it'll be fun to unpack some of that today. But in the meantime, Asheville is, returning to normal, and it sounds like some of our favorite places to hike up there might be reopening soon too. And uh, I saw the other day the governor was out west highlighting all the businesses that are open, and um, just trying to get tourism moving again. And yeah, uh,
Yeah, the Orange Peel is building a new outdoor music venue in an area that was previously destroyed by the flood, and so I'm very
ooh,
excited about that.
nice. Yeah, because that was usually like some of the coolest like artists would go to the Orange Peel, but it was a tiny venue, so you couldn't get like the big acts. So I think like they'll scale it up a little bit.
Yeah, and Salvage Station, which was one of my favorite venues in the city, it was completely destroyed. They're going to build in a space in the River Arts District, so we're getting there soon,
Nice.
little by little.
Awesome.
Well,
Glad to hear that. All
yeah.
right. Okay, so it looks like our attendance has leveled out a little bit. Folks are pretty much joined. So we are going to go ahead and get started today. So thank you everyone for taking the time to join us for this fabulous discussion from Crisis to Connection, how Asheville scaled community engagement for disaster recovery. It's going to be a great session today where we'll have Logan talking about how Asheville navigated the challenges of recovery from Hurricane Helene. Wanted to go through just a few housekeeping items here before we get started. This, I promise, will not be the most exciting part of the webinar. We're going to save some time for questions at the end, but you can go ahead and drop those questions in the Q&A module in Zoom as the presentation goes on, and then we'll save some time at the end to address those. So as you think of things, feel free to pop them in there. Also, feel free to use the chat to say hello and introduce yourself. We have a lot of community engagement practitioners here today. It'd be great to learn where you're from and a little bit about what you're here to learn today. And then lastly, a recording of this webinar will be sent to you within the next 24 hours. So if you have any peers who would like to listen to the discussion or you would like to revisit later, you will have access to that recording. And so today, as I mentioned, we have with us our guest of honor, Logan Smith from the City of Asheville. A little background on Logan. Logan is a strategic communications leader with nearly 2 decades of experience at the intersection of media, technology, and public policy. Currently serving as the media engagement coordinator for the City of Asheville, Logan spearheads multi-platform communication strategies and oversees the technical direction of hybrid public meetings to ensure transparent governance. Logan actually just hosted a city council meeting last night, for those of you who are curious. Logan and his team
Nice.
in the city of Asheville are recipients of our Champion of Community Trust Award, celebrating those who build authentic, lasting relationships with their communities. This award recognizes practitioners who really go above and beyond to ensure inclusion in their communities. Also with us today, we have Jay, the founder and CEO of Public Input. Jay started the company to solve challenges he encountered firsthand as a transportation consultant. He set out to build a mission-oriented company to help public agencies improve their relationship with residents through technology. Jay leads the development of the company's early products, and now, a decade later, continues to maintain an active role in product innovation and development. So Jay is very knowledgeable on the subject as well with his background. And I'm Stephanie Bergman. I'm the director of marketing here at Public Input. I actually come from a background in government as well. I used to work as a marketing and community engagement specialist for the city of Longmont in Colorado, followed by a long-standing career in GovTech. So I too am very excited for the conversation to really dive into the success that Asheville had with community engagement in the face of a disaster. And before I hand it
Thanks,
over
Steph.
to Jay, just wanted to go through a quick agenda of what we're going to talk about. So we're going to kick it off just giving an overview for those of you who might not be familiar regionally with North Carolina and an overview of Hurricane Helene's impact. We're going to talk about the multi-channel engagement blueprint that Asheville used in their community engagement. We're going to talk about how they prioritize equity, how they leverage data, how they built and maintained public trust throughout the whole community engagement process and beyond, and then created a lasting engagement infrastructure that can be leveraged outside of just disaster recovery from Hurricane Helene. And as I mentioned, time at the end for Q&A. So with that, Jay, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Steph. And thanks everybody for jumping into the chat. It's so great to see familiar names and faces. And obviously, a big part of all of this is creating the community and the connections between folks that are doing the work. One thing that I really love about today is that when we talk about the communications work in the public sector, we often think about the pandemic as like the ultimate crucible for a number of communicators that are here today, including you, Steph. But have you and Logan both have gone through that experience in the communications and engagement world is really cool. And to have Logan not only see that, but also this uh, incredibly challenging circumstance in Asheville with the Hurricane Helene impacts. I think it's great to unpack learnings and share those. So uh, would encourage everybody that's chatting with each other today to like connect, get to know each other, and use like this platform as a chance to build greater community and camaraderie in this work. So excited for today. But I think many of you are probably already familiar somewhat with Hurricane Helene and the devastating impact it had not only on Asheville but on a number of communities throughout Appalachia and North Carolina and I believe Georgia, Tennessee. Well, Asheville, however, I think stands as an interesting example of how that created both a challenge but also an opportunity to bring people together to do something even bigger than we could have done before. So I think just to tee up today, I wanted Logan for you to share your experience um, as things unfolded. Obviously, September of 2024, we knew this was a big storm. We knew things were going to be difficult. We'd seen flooding before in Asheville, but this time was different. So maybe take us through those early moments and when maybe your team realized that this one wasn't quite what we expected.
Yeah, well, we had, that week, a few days before the storm, we started hearing from our emergency management director that like this was the real deal, and we were gonna expect, you know, bad things, and but even knowing what was coming, I think a lot of us really did not. Have the full breadth of imagination to really know what to expect. Because, for the first couple days after the storm hit, Asheville was dealing with multiple crises at once, all of which individually would have been, one of the worst crises, we have experienced in the last several years. We had entire neighborhoods cut off, roads washed out, trees down. The River Arts District was devastated. Power was out throughout the city. Water was out through much of the city. Cell towers was down. Cell towers were down. And, to top it all off, we were just one community out of many that was going through this. So, the focus of the response was extremely widespread. And, overnight, the community conversation shifted. We went from talking about stuff like, regulating flag lots and accessory dwelling units to like, where can I get drinkable water? How do I find out if my parents are okay? And so, in moments like that, it's really hard to describe like how quickly your world shrinks to immediate survival. Um, and so, engagement in that moment from the city was incredibly urgent. People desperately needed reliable information. I mean, in many cases, it was literally life or death. And, other people needed to know if they should try to evacuate the city or try to stick it out. The challenge, of course, is that our normal channels, which we've gotten so used to using to engage with people over the past years and decades, they were no longer functioning. Our phones were essentially just expensive paperweights. I could get a few text messages in and out at about 6 a.m. before most people started waking up, but that was about it for everything other than face-to-face conversation. So we needed to rethink the way that we got our information out, all while everyone was overwhelmed and grieving losses and not knowing what came next. Not just, residents, but also us at the city. And what it came down to for us, at least in those early days, was printing off hundreds of one-page info sheets each day because we had a generator at City Hall, so that was at least working. Printing off these one-page info sheets every day, reflecting the latest information because information was changing every single day, and then driving them around town to the different supply distribution points across the city. Um, I would do that for 6 to 8 hours a day, and then I'd go back home and dry out my basement and rip up carpet and try to tape up my sunroof, which was smashed by a tree limb. Um,
Wow.
Now, once the community started to get out of the immediate emergency mode, our engagement efforts, weren't any less important, but people were still displaced. Internet was still spotty for many people. To give you an idea of, how long all this lasted, I was out of power for 2 weeks. Did not have water for about 3 or 4 weeks. I was using, at first I was using water from the creek to flush my toilet. And then after that, getting jugs of water from tanker trucks. And then we didn't have clean water for close to 2 months.
Wow.
Um, so the question
It sounds like
became, sorry.
I was gonna say a lot of folks tried to find housing outside of the city during all that. So, do you know generally how many folks may have been left or estimates around that? Was it maybe half the population or? Uh,
I would think so. My neighborhood pretty much emptied after that first weekend once we realized like this is not like a couple days kind of thing. This is like a several weeks to months kind of thing. I was telling people in my network like if you can possibly not be here, don't be here. We were fortunate that my wife and kids were able to go to her parents' house in Charlotte once I-26 was back open.
yeah.
And it was just day in and day out a struggle.
Yeah. That's probably a good shout out for some of our NCDOT folks here as well. They were instrumental in teaming up with Asheville there. But yeah, so now you have this challenge of we're starting to get communications infrastructure back in place. We can communicate in some ways with folks, but we've also got displaced residents, and obviously people that maybe need things the most are the ones that don't have the means to get them. And so at that point, how did the strategy shift?
Well, we knew that like these recovery decisions were going to shape the city for decades, and people needed a voice in what came next. And we also knew that like if we didn't create a clear place for people to engage, these decisions would move forward without them. And so we were getting like hundreds of emails a day in our joint information center. Like I went back and looked this morning. It's like 2,000 over the course of like the first few weeks. And often these people were asking the same questions. And so we needed a way to transition from the one-to-one communication when somebody emails in, we email back, to one-to-many. And we had emergency briefings with the city manager and the county government and the federal government. But one thing we saw very quickly is that the normal that we had before was not working equally well for everyone. Certain communities were hit harder. Some neighborhoods already had infrastructure weakness before the storm, and we knew that if recovery simply meant rebuilding things exactly as they were, we'd simply be rebuilding those same vulnerabilities. And so from the very beginning, we tried to treat recovery as an opportunity to build something not just the way it was, but stronger and more equitable. And that meant, asking residents not just what should fix, but also asking like what we should improve so the next one doesn't hit the same people the hardest.
Yeah. And those were hard trade-offs too, right? You can't just say yes to everything. Or, I think the thing you mentioned before was that sometimes building it right was going to take much longer. And so, I think a lot of folks, even outside of disaster recovery, see that trade-off when they're planning projects all the time, where it's like there are key decisions that can be made about this that are going to have trade-offs, and sometimes helping the public understand those things becomes the first hurdle. We can't say yes to everything here.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we needed one central place where people could, understand what we were working on, provide feedback and, see what everyone else was seeing, the same information going forward. And, so our long-term plan was to have this, kind of like standalone.org website that would serve as the main hub for, all aspects of the recovery. If anyone has ever built a website, you know that like building a site like that takes a lot of time, which we did not have. These decisions were moving, much faster. We needed something right away. And pretty soon we knew that we would need a place where people could weigh in on the priorities for rebuilding what had been lost. And very quickly that led us to public input for a lot of reasons. Our team was already familiar with the platform. We've been using it ever since COVID, when we had to, do public meetings. Remotely, and it had a lot of flexible tools that we could quickly combine for what we were looking for. We were able to use timelines for recovery milestones, for deadlines for applying for assistance. We had surveys and questions, different question types we could use. We had integrated communications like the shared inboxes and newsletters so that if something comes in and somebody addresses it, we know that if something has been addressed because we're seeing it in the shared inbox. It's not just either being CC'd to the entire city or going into a black hole. And so within a month, we built the Recovery Engagement Hub on public input, which became our landing page for all engagement related to storm recovery. It has evolved over the months. It's still in use. And the guiding goal was always to create a clear front door for engagement where people could get reliable information, ask questions, and help shape recovery priorities.
It's a really cool, different application of all these different tools, and some of those we had not even imagined before. One of the things I thought was really impressive was the way you all spun up multiple recovery boards, kind of focused on these different topics, and creative application there of the board and commission infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about how those boards were driving engagement or interfacing with the public?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of was born out of immediate necessity where, we have a lot of different departments in the city. There's no way for one person to cover everything. And so, right from the start, we started dividing up the communications liaison work where, one person would handle storm debris, one person was handling water recovery, one person, so on and so on. And so that way, when we came together as a team, we would have updates from everything, but we didn't have to rely on one person, knowing everything. And as we got out of the, immediate emergency phase, we that kind of kept on where all of our recovery efforts are kind of divided up into a number of different buckets. And that way we can have, some of our boards and commissions are on pause. Some of the work is being funneled through these recovery boards. And so that way, we're still letting residents have decision-making power and input through these recovery boards. But everything is being housed in different buckets. So we're not just, all over the place.
Creating organization to the data. It's something we're passionate about for sure. Oh,
Yeah.
in terms of where things went. Oh, go ahead, Steph.
No, I was gonna say, one of the things, Logan, that you had mentioned when we were prepping for this that I thought was pretty cool in terms of like the multi-channel engagement blueprint is we talked a lot about like community-based organizations and working with them. And you brought up a really good point that I hadn't considered when it came out of my mouth was that like those community-based organizations were no longer meeting in person because they didn't have water, they didn't have power. And you talked a little bit about your community connectors program and some other kind of unique ways that you were able to meet residents where they are at that time, which to me reminded me very much of like my experience working as a communications person through COVID, where it's like you took, here's what we usually do, here's the situation that is no longer true anymore. So now how do we adapt our strategy so we can make sure that that component of our community engagement infrastructure is not completely lost? So curious if you could just talk a little bit about like that community connectors program and kind of how you guys like thought outside the box. You even had people positioned at like bus stops and really like seeking people out and meeting them where they were.
Yeah, so this is a program that we've actually been running for a few years, even before the storm. So we were very lucky to have this infrastructure already in place. And it's essentially a program where people from the community who have trusted relationships within the community come in and they get training from us and when we have an initiative that we need to engage with the public, especially in communities where there might be a history of distrust with local government. They might not trust us, but they trust their neighbor, and folks can go, whether it's door to door or to neighborhood meetings and share that information and get feedback directly rather than this information coming from the government and everything that comes with that. When we spooled up our recovery priorities survey, which was our biggest initiative around finding out what people really wanted to see for the future, we really tried to meet people where they were. Of course, there was a lot of digital promotion, social media, news media, the daily briefings. We sent out a mass email blast to all 25,000 subscribers on our public input hub. We also use those in-person outreach tactics, flyers at community centers. Our neighborhood outreach staff went to every neighborhood meeting that was happening. We promoted the survey in person. Residents could complete the survey on digital kiosks at the meetings. And then, as Steph mentioned, our community connectors, we're going door to door in some of our traditionally underserved, overlooked neighborhoods and getting that input as well. And I think the biggest advantage that we had here was that this was one situation where we didn't need to convince people why this survey mattered. People wanted a voice in what the rebuilding would look like, and they understood how important these decisions were going to be. Our only challenge was reaching them in such a hectic, distracted moment. The key lesson here is that you know, no single channel reaches everyone. You have to find out over time what works for your community, and then layer that together. So we weren't building tools from scratch. We were just scaling up what we had already been building over time, and we're lucky to have a lot of that infrastructure in place.
Love that. If you think about like the multi-channel dimension of this, it's of course a public-facing hub, and like from an engagement platform perspective, that part is immediately obvious, but the hub for all the digital communications that were happening, whether it was the emails coming in, the voicemails, the text messaging, and all the comments coming in through that digital hub in one place for your team to manage. Love that application of things. And in terms of the numbers, I mean, you all just in that first engagement push, I think it was like almost 7,000 people that you touched through all that work. It's really remarkable. I mean, given the population of Asheville, um, it's what at least almost 10% of residents, if not more. Um,
And we
yeah,
had, participation coming in from all over the country.
sure.
And, it was important not to, try to filter that out because, we had people, evacuating, across the state, across the country. And, you know, um, the fact that we were still able, those people were still following what was happening at home. We were still able to reach them, still able to get their input. That was, really important for us.
Yeah,
That was one thing, Logan, during our discussion that you had brought up because we were talking about like the concept of prioritizing equity, in your outreach and in your public and communications and public engagement. And one of the things you pointed out with equity mapping is that there was a lot of people who were responding to the survey that didn't necessarily weren't doing so from Asheville. And to your point, they were maybe doing it because they were staying, with a relative in out west or east. So that, is really impressive that regardless of where people were physically, you were still able to connect with them through the engagement hub and do so in a way that you're making sure you were including all audiences, regardless of their socioeconomic status or, language spoken through your multilingual outreach as well.
Yeah, we knew early on that some of the people who were among the worst impacted by the storm were also most at risk of being left out of the conversation. Um, and like renters, lower income households, communities of color. These are people that we see often when we run surveys. Their participation is lower than like the census numbers that we have for Asheville. And so these are communities that we always try, but especially so in this instance, we were really intentional about reaching people so that we would have a really comprehensive look at what people wanted across the city and in all walks of life. Translating materials like not just into Spanish, but like Ukrainian, because we have a large Ukrainian population. Again, the goal was to go where people already were instead of expecting them to come to us. And I think that we were fairly successful at that.
it seems like the data that we can see from this side of things, like you were segmenting into these different groups and focusing on groups that we would expect to see disproportionate impact from the storm. If we're thinking about lower income individuals and the like. So I love this slice that you guys took intentionally in terms of the segmentation of respondents, knowing that, of course, we're going to get the folks that we usually hear from, the folks that have means and understand the process, understand how to exert influence in government, but then people who might not be as connected or resourced, and to be able to zoom in on those, I think is such a powerful thing. Not just obviously for disaster relief, but in any effort to understand our community writ large. We talk a little bit about how that played out as you're looking at the data.
Yeah, well, we were really fortunate to have such a large response because if we run a survey and 100 people respond, maybe five of them might be people of color, but that's not good data, and it's not representative data. But if we run a survey and 7,000 people respond, then we're able to really slice that data down and get a much better look at what folks across the community are thinking and the experiences they have, which are often very different compared based on where you live, how you live, that sort of thing. And we've seen a lot. This really like changed the conversation because elected officials often hear from the people who show up most, the folks who attend meetings, send the emails, or already have relationships with leadership. And those voices matter, but they're often not representative of the whole community. And so, this really let us step back and say, here's what we're hearing from thousands of residents across Asheville. Here's what different communities are telling us. It's not fully scientific, of course. It's just the nature of this type of survey, but it's much more representative, and it helps us, break down the data by, geography, demographics, housing status, and see what the clear priorities that start to emerge. Stuff like, infrastructure resilience, housing stability, economic recovery, food security. Just thinking through that list right now, that covers a lot of what the recovery work that we're doing right now looks like. Those priorities continue to be driven by the input that we got.
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned earlier was that when we slice the data into certain groups, like the example you shared was mental health services being something that in the overall data set was a smaller slice. But then when you look at particular groups, it jumped up as a major priority. Um, I think that's maybe what was highlighted visually here. But were there other topics like that that kind of bubbled up when you were able to slice down?
Yeah, yeah, three-quarters of young people talked about struggles with mental health following the storm. That was a big spike that was really um, emotionally resonant with me. We saw that low-income residents, people of color were more likely, at least based on the responses we got, more likely to experience loss of income after the storm. And a lot of the, renters and day-to-day working class folks in Asheville. Businesses were closed. A lot of, apartments close to the rivers were closed or flooded out. And, it really highlighted for us the urgency and importance of, a targeted and thoughtful recovery.
Yeah. It's like the prioritization. Like we can go clear debris that might be an eyesore, or we can put those resources to work trying to help people get back to work. And when you get this kind of data, it makes it clear that there's more urgent needs, even than the things we can see that are obvious.
Yeah, it allowed us to bring a much broader picture of the community into the room, which, still we're seeing the benefits of.
Yeah, there's so
It's
many
very cool.
tactics here, I think, that you've been talking about, Logan, that are just very like reminiscent of very similar tactics that we used during COVID. Just keeping in mind, similar to that, there was like uh certain residents that were impacted more, those residents that had those like frontline jobs that were considered essential workers that still had to go to work every day, sometimes were like often paralleled with low income workers. So just like getting that feedback, I think, is super important because without that type of context in terms of how people are responding and where they're struggling, it does kind of dilute the data in a way that you wouldn't necessarily have that clarity, until you're able to like slice it in a meaningful way. One of the things you guys did that I thought was really cool was this Helene Recovery Priority Survey report that you put out. I think one of the most like, important things in public engagement is like closing the loop. Like, okay, we asked, and what did we do with that information? I think that's something that oftentimes is maybe the last thing that gets done, and therefore potentially something that doesn't necessarily, get done as well as it should have. So can you talk a little bit about how that like data helped to inform these recovery priorities that you guys published in this survey, and kind of kept the residents in the loop to say like you spoke, we listened, and here's the outcomes and what we're going to do for you as a city.
Yeah, one thing that is a core principle of our engagement, going back well before I joined the city, is that we never ask a survey question or anything for resident input. We never ask a question just to ask it. If we're asking for residents' time and perspective, it's because that input needs to directly inform a decision or project. People can tell when an engagement opportunity is just for appearances, and we're just going through the motions, and that erodes trust very quickly. And so we're very intentional that every question, every engagement opportunity needs to have a purpose, and most importantly, that we report back on how the feedback is shaping what happens next. Closing the loop is how people learn that their participation actually matters. And so, you see that reflected here in the priorities survey. One thing that we were very intentional about, and that continues to drive how we approach recovery, is we asked people, um, should we um, should we rebuild quickly to get everything back normal exactly the way it was? Or should we be intentional about rebuilding stronger and more resilient, even if it takes longer? Because everybody on paper wants resilience. It's hard to find somebody who's against resilience. But when you're going months without seeing clear progress, then that frustration starts to grow. And so we wanted to see what people really thought. And we, you know, we were astounded. A huge majority said we want to rebuild intentionally more resilient, even if it takes longer. 96% of respondents said that out of 7,000 people who took the survey. I have never seen results
Wow.
like that. I've been doing surveys a long time. And I like to tell people that, I can write the most ridiculous question option imaginable, and 10% of the
Somebody.
respondents will
Yeah.
still say it. Like a few years ago, there was a poll question that said, like, should we bomb the nation of Agrabah, which of course is the fictional kingdom from the movie Aladdin. And like 30% of people said yes.
Sure.
So, you're always going to get a few people who either aren't paying attention or, just want to be funny or whatever. But 96% of people said, we want this to be intentional and stronger and more resilient, even if it takes longer.
Yeah.
And that is continuing to drive how we approach recovery. We're still, taking that lesson to heart. And, there will be people who, sometimes complain about not seeing results quick enough, but having those results early on makes it so that we're not constantly second guessing ourselves.
It's excellent. I love the collective wisdom that can emerge from a moment like that, where it's like, no, we can't go back. We have to forge a new way forward here. It's wonderful.
Great. So just moving along to, talking about, you guys obviously built in tremendous amount of trust with your community, through this process, I think, which happens a lot in times of crisis. Can you talk a little bit just about like maintaining that public trust after you build it? Obviously, recovery is not linear. Recovery is not something that happens overnight. So maintaining trust with the public throughout this process is very, very important. Reminding them maybe when they're asking, why are things taking so long? That it was a priority of the community to make sure you were building back smarter, stronger and more resilient than ever. Can you talk a little bit about just how you're working to, maintain that public trust through community engagement, even outside of just the Helene recovery efforts and continuing to engage with your community in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing here is that our engagement isn't just a one-time thing. We didn't just, run the priority survey, say, all right, here's what people want, and then go do our own thing. This is an ongoing process. Right now, a big project that we're working on is talking about how to rebuild the parks along the French Broad River and the Swananoa River, which were, completely, practically scraped clean. Um, and, there are a lot of different ways that we can go about this. We can, restore all of this stuff exactly the way it was. We can, have a lot of, environmental, natural features. We can lean really hard into like play and fitness and activities. We've got only so much money, we've got only so much room, so we're going to have to make decisions. And so, we're continuing to engage with people at every step of the project, not just that project, but on everything we're doing. And like I said, continuing to follow up with people and close that loop so that people know that their feedback is being taken into consideration. Even if people don't get exactly what they want individually, they know that their input isn't going into a black hole and then some consultant is making a decision for them. They're really having a voice. I'm a City of Asheville resident. I want to know that my voice matters. I take the surveys too, and um, so we try to really focus on, what people really need to know right now. We send updates regularly. I'm still writing a monthly recovery newsletter that, started a month after the storm. It started weekly, then it became bi-weekly. Now it's monthly, which is a good thing. It means that, the news is becoming less urgent, although no less important. But really um, trying to be honest as much as possible, acknowledging uncertainty when it exists, and recognizing that recovery, isn't just a government effort. It's a community effort. My house flooded, my car roof was smashed, but I was still out there every day helping where I could, clearing fallen trees, going on gas runs, checking in on older residents. And, across the city, we saw like neighbors helping neighbors, people looking out for us. And, so if there's like one bright spot to all of this, it's that, I got to see our community like really, um, show up for each other. And that's something really special.
Yeah, that is awesome to see.
There's this moment where suddenly we're all on the same page. We're all
Yeah.
just in this together. And that's a powerful thing that you want to tap into. Um,
Yeah, and there's
and
just kind of a visual to go with what you said, Logan, on the screen, just an example of how you guys have continued to use your engagement hub for other projects outside of, Helene as things start to return to normal, now that folks are used to engaging via your engagement hub and public input, just continuing to position that as the go-to place for all of your engagement efforts, which also leads to a very interesting data point about just your general contacts that you collected in your subscriber base, which we actually have a question that we'll get to at the end of the discussion, kind of about like how many residents that you were able to get engaged with. You can talk a little bit just about how Hurricane Helene kind of grew your subscriber database and how you've leveraged that moving forward.
Yeah, we're trying to make engagement as easy as possible. If participation requires a lot of time or some really complicated tools or navigating a bunch of different websites. People got a lot going on. They just won't do it. And so we really try to create a clear front door for engagement, where people know that they can find information, they know they can ask questions, and they know they can share feedback. So you know, those multiple communication channels, like we talked about earlier, we try to leverage all of those to show that input actually influences decisions, and make it as easy as possible for people to listen and respond.
I love the way this compounds. One of the big reasons we're passionate about that central database is that every time you touch the public or a member of your community through a system like this, you can store that, remember that, and have the context of what this person cares about, why they engaged in the first place, or what city council meeting they came out to, what agenda item they signed up for, what survey they responded to. And it's remarkable to see that compound for Asheville. I mean, you guys have obviously, these are subscribers. I think you've touched at this point uh, almost 100,000 people, if not more. But even 30,000 plus of those, you have the ability to close the loop with, which
Yeah, it's been really
it's great to
helpful to
see.
use the public input database to kind of manage those communications, especially when it comes to different topics, because people care about what they care about, and if I'm blasting them every single update on every single topic, like they're gonna tune out real quick. I know I would, but by letting people, indicate what they feel is most important, we're able to make sure that they're continually seeing those topics. Like if, somebody takes a survey about parks, then I can be reasonably sure that they care about parks. And the next time we run a survey on parks, I'm going to make sure that they see it. And keeping those, that database of people who care, makes sure that we're not forcing people to, every single time find a survey organically. That we are continually reaching to the people who care and the people who we most need to hear from.
Yeah, it's like we're not just hammering the same tired list every time we need to have input on something. It's like a living system. So even every topic, whether it's pickleball or parks or uh, greenways or transportation or planning or you name it, there's different parts of our community that care about each of these things. Some care about pickleball more than others and the like. So every time you have those opportunities, you're building out a diversified set of folks based on different interests. So it's really cool to see.
I'm just
I
laughing
do
because I
need to
feel like,
start a pickleball list in public input.
well, that's like the whole, like the pickleball thing, it comes up so often. Like that was
Yeah,
it, like it started what,
it's
five
the
or
thing.
6 years ago. It's like, I feel like every community has a pretty heated discussion going on around pickleball right now.
Yeah. If you want to grow your subscriber list, have a pickleball survey or a backyard chicken survey, or there's a lot of these topics that bring out a particularly uh, vocal group of folks. So,
Yeah, the backyard chicken one, that's also a good one too.
yeah, people are
We
passionate about it. I get it.
I know, I get it. We did have some questions come through in the chat. And Logan, these are both for you. Can you talk a little bit about how did you get these documents translated into so many languages? Um, I know you used public input for some of that, but also had some like printed sheets as well. If you could to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that was a big challenge for us, especially in the early days, when we were pretty much just doing what we could with the info sheets. We were very lucky to have a couple of native Spanish speakers on staff that if we needed to, we would in the morning, we would get the final document in English, pass it off to one of our Spanish speaking staff members who would quickly translate it into Spanish, and then get that out the door. For like the survey, we were using a lot of the public input native translation tools, and then hosting specific versions of the survey in that language that people could use. QR codes, if you need to take the
Yeah.
survey in Ukrainian, use this QR code, or what have you, rather than just expecting people to navigate to the little box at the top of the site and then do that themselves. We've also, lately started using more AI on translation. However, we learned pretty quickly that those AI translations are not as accurate as you might think, and so we really do have to take the time to like go through it and then verify because we've had some people like on social media share like what the translations are really saying, and it's funny, but also we want to get it right, and so we're always experimenting with new tools to do it quickly and accurately.
Great. Yeah, that last mile translation is always definitely something that is an important component to have someone kind of take a look and make sure that Google Translate or AI tools are translating them properly. Another question too, and while we ask that question, I'm going to go ahead and just launch a quick poll to the audience if anyone wants to schedule a meeting with us to
Nice.
learn more just about how Asheville built this blueprint for community engagement success. Just answer that poll and we'll reach out to you. Another question we have is how were you able to get residents to engage with your survey in such large numbers? Did you already have a dedicated following on public input prior to the campaign for the store?
Um, kind of all of the above. We had an email list in public input that in the database about 25,000 people. Going all the way back to COVID. We sent out a mass blast to them. We've never done that before. We would only do that if it was a very special situation. To try not to send people things that they haven't specifically asked for. But this was one of those times. But um, it didn't stop there. It was just, full court press, online, offline, news media, any way that we could think of to meet people where they are. With any city, it's going to be different. But we really spent a lot of time thinking about, how can we reach not just a lot of people, but the right people to make sure that we were getting, clear responses from all parts of the community.
Yeah. Well, you guys have done a tremendous job. And Logan, I really appreciate you hopping on here today to share both your personal story and the story of Asheville. Hopefully you're seeing signs that things are moving, continuing to move in the right direction. It sounds like that's the case as the frequency of the updates spread out a little bit. Any other signals you're seeing that things are moving in the right direction?
Yeah, one thing that really stuck with me was realizing things were finally getting back to like some semblance of normal. Was when people started being jerks in traffic again. Like during those first few weeks, all the traffic lights were out. Everyone was patient. People were waving each other through. Neighbors were checking on neighbors. And at some point, I remember like somebody cuts me off in traffic, and I was like, okay, the city is healing.
We are so back. That is wonderful. Gosh, well, I can't wait to be back in Asheville and see the progress and feel that. But thank you for everything you do for the city and of course for the engagement practice and for sharing that with so many people today. These are very valuable lessons that I think we can carry into a lot of lines of work.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you everyone for jumping on and attending. I know you guys have a lot going on. Your plates are full, so we appreciate you spending some time with us today to learn more about Asheville's story.
Good to
Bye,
see y'all.
everyone.
Thanks, Logan.
Thanks.